Welcome to Eviliv, the live media commentary show that answers the question, how long is the shelf life on human flesh? Subscribe to the channel because today we are reviewing The Road. That's right, I'm only almost 20 years late, but I got here. I got here. All right, my initial thoughts are, wow, why haven't I read this already? Like, I love the film. It, like, devastates me every time I watch it, and it's one of those films that I go back to on a regular basis. It really messes me up, but I love how it makes me feel. I love feeling sort of down and desperate and terrified and scary. I mean, it's the reason why I watch horror films, right? You want to sort of feel, well, anything. I just want to feel something. No, this is a brilliant, brilliant novel. So my initial thoughts are, wow, this is amazing. I wish I would have read this earlier. I don't know what took me so long. It was just like, even I got it on my library app, right? So you sign up to your local library and you can download ebooks or audiobooks. And I did the ebook because I like to take my time and just sort of consume the novel at my own, I don't know, leisure, I guess, at my own pace. And this is a very short novel. It's under 300 pages. And so it doesn't take long to get through. I mean, this took me 2 days of just sort of reading. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. One thing that kind of bothers me about modern writers is they don't use punctuation as much as I think that they should. At least, certainly this author doesn't. And there's some other authors that I really, really enjoy reading who just don't really... I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a modern movement. Like, they just don't use quotes when one person is saying something, and, just like general punctuation in writing. They're very sort of willy-nilly with it. It's worth putting up with not having that in order to read this amazing goddamn novel. Okay, so initial thoughts out of the way. Let's talk about it. This is written by American writer Cormac McCarthy. He also did No Country for Old Men and a bunch of other, I don't know, I suppose wonderful writing, novels or novellas or short stories or whatever. If it's this good, if he's capable of putting this out, he must be great in everything else he puts out. Again, I cannot stress it enough. I really love this novel. It is a post-apocalyptic story. Some of the people that read this think it was an environmental situation that caused the post-apocalyptic world that this novel takes place in. Some people say it was some sort of, world war or a nuclear war or natural disaster or whatever. It's never addressed. Not once. We just come into the story with it having already happened, and any reflections are based primarily on the father and son dynamic and their recollection, primarily the father, about life beforehand. But it's never addressed, and so however you want this apocalypse to have happened, that's fine. The reality is there's no sun. There are particles in the sky. It seems like, in my opinion, it was like a volcanic eruption, and there's just ash constantly raining as if it was snow. Because there's no sun breaking through that layer of ash that is all in the upper atmosphere, nothing can live. And so we enter this world where there's literally no vegetation that's survived. Food is a scarcity. People are forced into either hunting other humans for food or literally eating babies and shit. And all of that actually happens in this novel. Now, I'm one of those weirdos that I have recurring dreams about this type of a world, this sort of post-apocalyptic, trying to survive with my family in this world where everyone is literally a dog-eat-dog world, and they're trying to kill you or enslave you or eat you for food or whatever, and I'm just trying to survive and live. And so reading this story, I mean, first of all, that's how I was introduced to the film, and Viggo Mortensen, anything he's in is goddamn amazing. He's the best goddamn actor out there, in my opinion. And I'm not just saying that. He genuinely is fucking amazing. And so anyway, I was introduced to the story through that, and so I became sort of obsessed with it. I'm now finally getting around to reading this novel. And the world that it paints is a world that I've dreamt. It's a world that I don't desire because it's horrible, but it's something that I am kind of drawn to. And I don't know why. I mean, there's a handful, a very small handful of video games that really play to this type of a world, and I've loved playing them. This is much more of a desperate world than, say, The Last of Us is. This is a world that's like way after The Last of Us, years after, where humanity has really degraded to just fight or flight, just survive or die. And the worst part about this is that there's literally no hope, right? There's no place you can flee to where there's a better form of life, because there's no sun able to pierce the layer of ash that is in the upper atmosphere. The planet is colder, more harsh. Weather is more violent and aggressive. And there's just no hope. There's no semblance of a potential of happiness. There's no aspiration of happiness. It's just misery. And so you're forced to live with the Father and the Son, just literally walking the road, trying to get south to a warmer climate, but having no real hope other than they just need to survive as long as they possibly can. And that's as good as it gets. Survive as long as you can. And so we're experiencing this novel through this father and son's eyes, where there's a constant questioning. And this child grew up in this era. He was ostensibly like birthed in this sort of chaotic after society world. And so he knows nothing other than this. And so he's comfortable talking about stuff like, are we going to die? Are they going to kill us? Are we going to eat them? Are they going to eat us? And the father is presenting this idea of him and his son are the good guys, and they're carrying the flame. I don't want to have to cry. I bawled like a baby at the end of this book. I knew what was coming because I've seen the film, and it still hit me harder than anything I've read, arguably ever. I mean, it is a devastating finale to this book, and just everything leading up to it is just a prelude to that devastation. And there's no pulling of punches. There's just moments of either sheer terror and horror or sheer elation when they find food or they find water. And it's just this moment of like super excitement, like, oh my gosh, they just stumbled randomly across this cache of food or canned goods or a bomb shelter, like a fallout shelter that they just happened to discover. And that's as good as it gets. You just find these little moments. Oh, we found a can of food or a jar of food. Let's indulge in this one little thing while we're actively starving and we have no hope on the horizon. So to say that this novel is bleak is underselling it. But it's so good because of it. Because then you get a focus on the dynamic between the father and son and the rest of this insane world that exists around them. So we get a bunch of flashbacks to the father and the wife. And she, after having the child, wants to kill the child and wants to kill herself. The reality is there's no future. Like, none. He just wants to survive as long as possible because he can't imagine killing his own son, and he can't imagine killing himself. And so he just wants to live. And the mother realizes that if the other ravagers, the other survivors, find her and her son, they're going to rape them both, and they're going to eat them both. And that's as good as it gets. And it's not like you're going to be murdered. They're going to take limb by limb, keeping you alive as long as possible so as to preserve your meat as long as possible so they can survive off of you. And all the while, they're getting their fancy off of you. They're fucking you. They're ruining you. It's devastating. But that's the reality of the world. And so the mother just wants to kill the son and kill herself. And she was hoping that the father would want to kill himself too so they could all, if there's an afterlife, be living in that afterlife. It's sort of coming from a place, sort of like I see the world, where I don't concern myself with the concept of an afterlife because I don't want that to gauge how I engage with this life. My focus is on the here and now. I don't believe there's an afterlife, but it's not something that I'm going to spend too much time hoping or wishing for, or changing my behavior in this world on the hopes, like all religious people everywhere, that there is something greater. I'm here. I'm going to enjoy as much as I can enjoy. I'm going to imbibe, and I'm going to just celebrate life while I'm here. I'm not going to abstain from it at all. And so that's kind of where the Father is coming from. Not exactly. He just wants to protect his son as much as he can and survive as long as he can. Because again, this is the only life we have. This is it. And human lifespans are infinitesimally small. So if you know you're going to die anyway, if you know that the end is there, why not try to find as much joy as possible, as much pleasure as possible, enough happiness as possible in this life? And that's what he's trying to do. And just the fact that the child has never experienced anything. He doesn't know what happiness is. Everything in life is a juxtaposition. You only know true joy when you've experienced true loss or pain or suffering. You only know true happiness if you've experienced true sadness. And you can think that, oh, well, I know what happiness feels like, or I know what joy feels like. But it's never as poignant until you've suffered. And so you can imagine a single can of peaches, how much joy that brings this father and son when they are literally starving to death and they have no idea where their next meal is going to come from. You can imagine if they find a book and they just get to read and tell a story to each other or have a wonderful dream, how wonderful that truly is, in contrast to the horror of the world they live in. It's just such a stunning exercise of thought. And we get to sort of live that through these characters. God damn it, it's so goddamn good. So again, this is a post-apocalyptic novel, obviously, but the novel has won a crazy amount of awards. So in 2007, it got the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction, James Tate Black Memorial Prize for Fiction in 2006, in Entertainment Weekly in June 2008 named it the best book, fiction or nonfiction of the past 25 years. Yeah! It's that good. In 2019, it was ranked 17th on the Guardian's list of the top 100 books of the 21st century, the last 100 years. And it was 17. I got to look and see what was number one. November 5th, 2019, the BBC News listed it as the top 100 most inspiring novels, which is interesting because the inspiration comes just from the father's insistence on surviving. And so that's really, and his love for his son, that's where the inspiration comes from. And, let's be honest here for a second, because being a parent is really, really hard in the best of times that we live in right now. It's never been in all of human history as good as it is right now. Even as bad as you think you have it, it's never been as good as you have it right now. So your worst is better than anyone else's worst of all human history. This puts things in perspective a little bit. And this story is so much worse than that. So being a parent in that time, in this novel's post-apocalyptic time, knowing that you just as a parent want your kid to survive, you want them to have a chance at a life, even if the world around you is literally crumbling. You still want to give them the best opportunity, because that's what we are as a species. We propagate and we hope that our children are going to have a better life than we did. And we strive for that. And seeing that in this novel, in this sort of post-apocalyptic world, it's devastating. And to see how the boy reacts to the environment and the situations that they find themselves in, and how he interacts with his father, it's fucking devastating. And it's so goddamn good. Oh, I say, so it won the award for the James Tate Black Memorial Prize in Fiction, the Believer Book Award. It was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. In 2007, it was awarded the Pulitzer Prize. It was shortlisted for the Best of the James Tate Black. In 2009, it was adapted into a film directed by John Hillcoat that I had mentioned already, starring Viggo Mortensen, and it was amazing. Fantastic film. You have to see it if you haven't. And some of the actual conversations between the father and son were inspired by conversations that the author McCarthy had with his son, John Francis, in real life. And that's kind of amazing too, because again, they were not living in this sort of post-apocalyptic world. So I'm not going to sort of go through beat by beat, but I will tell you some of my highlights and my most and least favorite moments of this novel. Because again, it is one of those where, as sad and devastating as it is, I desperately love it. And so it's hard for me to find a least favorite part, but I'm going to do my best. They experience things like they run across a home that they don't know who's in it, but they always are constantly staying away from other humans because other humans are slavers and cannibals and, take things from other people. It's literally a might is right situation. And most numbers exhibit the might. And so if a group of marauders are coming around and you're only one man and one kid with a revolver with 2 rounds in it, you're kind of screwed. So early on, we're introduced to a situation where they're on the road and they hear some other people coming. And so they hide and these marauders stop and one guy's taking a leak and he's right next to them. He sees them and the father pulls out the revolver and the guy doesn't believe he'll actually shoot him. And so the father does in fact shoot him in order to protect his son. And now he only has 1 round left. And the whole idea of having the 2 rounds was that he could kill his son and he could kill himself if they were ever too close to be captured. Because he doesn't want his son to be raped and eaten. But that is the inevitable result. Human beings, we pretend like, we're the best. We have the best of things in mind and heart. And more people are good than are bad. But in a post-apocalyptic world, you can't survive and be good. You can't. You're going to get fucking eaten. You're going to be fucking murdered. Like, that's the result of good people. And so you have to be as hard and as vile and wretched as the world around you in order to survive. So the people who have survived this long are the worst of all of humanity. And so he knows, the father, if anyone gets his son, it's just going to be torture until death. And he does not, no parent would want their kid to suffer like that. And so he has 2 rounds. Now he only has 1, and he knows he cannot kill his own son. And the more he reflects on this, no matter how desperate the situation, and so he's trying to teach his son, look, if it gets bad, if I don't come back, if I die, you need to know how to kill yourself so you don't have to suffer. And just imagine that for a second. The life lesson that you're teaching your son or your daughter is how to murder themselves so that they're not conscious while they're raped and consumed. That's fucking devastating. But that's the reality of this world that they're in. Oh, it's amazing. So they come across this home. They don't know anything about it. They're looking for food. That's really the only thing you're ever looking for is water and food. And so they just sort of find a locked door. They think if it's a locked door, someone must be hiding something in there. So they bust open the lock, they get down inside, and it's people who are missing limbs. They're emaciated and starving. It's literally food for whoever owns this house. All these people are captured. And then they hear the people coming back home. And so they're desperately trying to run and get away from him and stuff. And as you're reading this, you're sort of panicking on behalf of the kid and the father. And the fact that the child has to see that. He has to see humans in the active state of being meat for other people to eat. Oh, it's just devastating. There's one really great moment where they come across, I had mentioned that bomb shelter. And he's like, Papa, did the people who built this, did they survive? And he's like, no, they didn't survive or else they'd be down here. He's like, would it be okay to eat the food? He's like, yeah, they would eat the food if they were alive, but since they're not alive, it's okay for us to eat it. It's not stealing because they're not around anymore. He's like, did they die, Papa? And it's just the conversation between the two of them is always sort of short snippets, but it's always this Papa question, father answers, Papa, okay, sort of back and forth, very cut and sort of concise and just really short dialogue. And it's the fact that they just can't have long conversations because they have to constantly be watching out for other people. Oh, it's just trying to mentally put yourself in this world is painful. So that was a great moment. They watched a woman running away from a bunch of people trying to capture and kill and rape her, and they didn't help her, even though the son really wanted to. They run across, but they would be murdered if they did get involved. They're constantly evaluating the pros and cons of any situation they're in with their own survival in mind, which you have to do. But the son, like most kids, wants to help other people. They don't understand that you can't help in some cases, that you're putting yourself in a position of being murdered, because ultimately in this time, in this sort of post-apocalyptic world, groups will send people out as like traps. So you have someone wandering around hurt and suffering and screaming for help. They're a decoy in order to draw out people so that the group can then consume, like come down on the people attempting to save that decoy. You know, just like hunters put out decoys for prey, that's what humans are used as. And so you have to be hard in your heart to know, I can't go after and save that child or that mother or that person because they could be a decoy. And if they're a decoy, then we're going to die. And I have to preserve my own life and my son's life, you know, in this story. So you run across situations which are devastating. They run across an old man who they're afraid is a decoy, ends up not being a decoy. They give him a little bit of food and he's like super distant. And you can't help, like the son is just crying and wanting to help him. And it's devastating seeing this world and living in this world through the son's eyes. But it's so beautiful too, because again, children are innocent. They're magical. No matter how horrible a world they're living in, it's the only world they know. And so they're constantly trying to bring some semblance of child perspective to that world. And they're not as hardened as us adults are. And it's beautiful to experience. It's tragic, but it's beautiful. So they run across a lot of situations like that where it's like survival. And then, you know, the child, of course, the son never wants to be separated from the father, but there's things the father has to do that are infinitely more dangerous. They run across other boys and stuff. And it turns out, ultimately, in the end of the story, that the father and the son have been followed by another family that is just concerned about the son, because you never really know what people are like. And so they never announce themselves. And ultimately, you know, I'm going to spoil this for the end, but again, it's been almost 20 years here. It's been 17 years since this novel has been out, and the film has been out since 2009, so you should know by now. But anyway, the father dies at the end, and the son is surviving, and this other family that's been following them, the father comes up and he says, look, we can take you with us. We're one of the good guys too. And the whole time, the dialogue between the father and the son throughout the whole novel is, we're carrying the flame. The flame being, we're the good guys. We're carrying the spark of true goodness. And that is, we don't eat people. We don't murder people unless we absolutely have to. And we don't steal from people unless we absolutely have to. So they try to be good as you could possibly be in a world like this. And for the child who is now looking at his, oh, this is going to devastate me, who is now looking at his father who is dead. And then all of a sudden this other person comes up and he only has the revolver with one round in it. He doesn't know, should I have to kill myself? Or is this actually someone that I can trust? And the dialogue between them is pretty sad and devastating, but believable in the situation. And ultimately the child ends up going with them after he says goodbye to his father. Oh, goddamn. It is beautiful though, man. I highly recommend it. And so he ends up going with this new family, and the story just sort of abruptly ends. Again, it's a very short story, and so you don't get a lot of contextualization. It's really just reactionary survivalism in this world. And so you sort of have to prep yourself for that emotionally, because you will, if you're a human with human emotions, you will be terrified. You'll be scared on their behalf, and you will be sad. My least favorite part of this is how the mother reacted. I would like to think that in the face of the reality of the world that they live in, I would be like the Father. I would like to think that I would be like the Father and just live my life and try my best to survive and keep my children alive and keep them as safe and alive as possible. But you can't help but see the mother's perspective, that there is no hope. There's no coming back. There's no chance of the world getting better. It's just suffering as long as you can, and then you die. So why not cut that suffering short? And so my least favorite part is her deciding to cut that short on her own and leave her son and her husband. Even though I can understand it, I can't accept it. Like, you're just going to abandon your kid? Like, I know your life is horrible. I get that. But this is it. This is the only life you get. And you're just going to, like, end it? That was my least favorite part of this entire novel. But, I mean, other than that, it was understandable. And so I can't really criticize it too much. You know, the prose is a little bit choppy because the punctuation isn't really there, and the way it's written is a little bit rough. But it does sort of... while I was reading this and I was sort of examining in my head, you know, why would he write it like this? Because I've never read any of the other novels that he's written. So I don't know if this is just normal or if this is just, you know, for this book. I kept thinking, is his writing deconstructed in order to off-put the reader because what we're reading is so deconstructed? You know what I mean? Is the writer putting us in a position to be uncomfortable because we're supposed to be uncomfortable? So he's doing it not just through the narrative, but he's also doing it through the mechanic of the narrative, the actual written story itself. That's something that a designer would do, in my profession, in order to effect the emotions of the people consuming the product. But I don't know if writers do that. And I don't know if editors would allow them to do that. And so the whole time I'm thinking, is this intentional? Is this just his way of writing? Is this, you know, some new way that authors are just writing now? Or is it just him? Like, I was constantly thinking about it in that way. So maybe that's my least favorite part. But if it was intentional, if he did it in order to upset the reader, in order to prep them, sort of prime them for this world that you're reading, well, then I have to kind of respect it. Because that's like that's like breaking the fourth wall of storytelling. And it's kind of amazing a little bit, you know? I mean, it's ingenious. So maybe it's a fantastic way of doing it. I don't know. For me, with this story, it worked perfectly. So my review of this, I mean, my rating, it's 5 out of 5. I can't give it anything but. This is an amazing story that will make you cry, that will make you fear for the father and son, make you identify with their choices, make you hope that there is some possibility of some semblance of happiness that they can find. And you will despair with them, and you will find joy when they find canned goods or jarred foods. I mean, you can't help but put yourself with them. You know, in the same way that the Neverending Story film as a child puts you in that situation literally through the formulation of the story. This novel did that for me in such a brilliant way. I love this novel desperately, and if this is what the author puts out regularly, I can't wait to get the next novel and see what other kind of stories he's going to tell. Do yourselves a favor, check this out. It is 100% worth your time. And again, it's under 300 pages, so it's not going to take you a lot of time to get through. And then after you're done reading it, go watch the film. Even if you've seen it before, do it again. Do yourself a favor. I'm going to review that sometime here soon as well. Thank you all so much for tuning into this review. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live, so get out there and be evil.